On May 9, 2024, at New Mexico State University, a protest erupted right in front of the university's administrative building, where students gathered to express their support for Palestine. Though the day had started to wind down, the passion of the participants showed no signs of fading. Blocking the main entrance to the building, they disrupted the university's regular operations, including the departure of faculty and staff who were ready to head home after a long day. What began as an ordinary act of protest quickly escalated into an event impossible to ignore, drawing the attention of both students and local police. A group of New Mexico State University students, full of fervor and a sense of justice, decided to organize a demonstration in support of Palestine. Their enthusiasm was admirable, but their choice of time and place was less than strategic. They determined that the best way to show their solidarity was to form a human barricade right at the entrance of the administrative building precisely at the time when faculty and staff were finishing their workday. The scene was akin to a perplexing puzzle no one wanted to solve. Professors, who had spent their day teaching and attending meetings, just wanted to leave the campus to enjoy a warm dinner or, at the very least, a comfortable spot on their sofas. Instead of the familiar open exit, they were met with a human wall, a crowd of students wielding colorful signs and chanting "Justice for Palestine" transformed the building's main entrance into an obstacle course more challenging than any final exam. Some faculty members initially tried to negotiate. They offered phrases like, "Could you scoot over a bit? I just need to get to my car." But the responses were often determined headshakes or steely gazes, as though these students were starring in a grand revolutionary drama. One mathematics professor, known for his characteristic humor, joked, "If I solve this equation, will you let me through?" But his query was met with the same collective silence. The more patient faculty members stood aside, muttering about how their lessons on free speech and protest rights might have been a bit too effective. The less patient ones attempted to squeeze through but largely gave up in the face of the crowd's unwavering solidarity. Administrative staff resorted to pulling out their phones, calling home with updates like, "I'll be late. There's a bit of traffic on campus." Meanwhile, the protesters maintained their resolve, as if every second spent blocking the path was contributing to a seismic shift in global justice. No one seemed to notice the irony. The faculty members behind the human wall were not oppressors or symbols of power, but merely exhausted individuals trying to get home. A handful of protesters were arrested for offenses like trespassing and obstructing traffic, or, more plainly, blocking the way for faculty and staff who just wanted to end their workday. However, when the police arrived to address the situation, things didn't go as smoothly as one might have hoped. The officers, initially there to simply clear the path and restore order, quickly became the focal point of heightened tension. Instead of backing down or engaging in dialogue, the protesters decided this was their moment to display unyielding defiance. The mere request to disperse was met with piercing glares, fiery accusations, and, of course, educationally rich slogans. The protesters, far from merely opposing the arrests, redirected their energy toward the police, casting them as symbols of global injustice. Phrases like "defenders of genocide" and "soldiers of the corporate elite" were shouted with unrelenting fervor. In the eyes of the protesters, the local police force typically tasked with handling minor traffic violations suddenly became representatives of the world's problems, from international conflicts to economic inequality. Some protesters, in moments of impassioned theatrics, stepped forward, pointing accusing fingers at the officers as though confronting the villains in a Hollywood epic. A few even invoked historical events and philosophical arguments, though their relevance was sometimes questionable, yet always delivered with dramatic flair. One protester shouted, "Do you realize that stopping us today is part of a centuries-long chain of oppression?" A visibly confused officer whispered to his colleague, "I just want them to move so I can do my job." The atmosphere resembled a crash course in street philosophy, but instead of polite discourse, it was a cacophony of accusations and emotional outbursts. One protester brandished a handmade sign declaring, "Police are the arm of imperialism." An officer, trying to stay calm, muttered under his breath, "Then why am I working night shifts to pay my kids' college tuition?" Polite phrases were hurled from all directions, from personal accusations like "You're destroying our future," to profound political concepts like "You're cogs in the capitalist machine." Yet amid the chaos, an ironic truth emerged. Most of the officers present had no real connection to the larger issues they were accused of representing. They were simply individuals doing their jobs, unwittingly dragged into a battle that was never theirs to fight. The event quickly shifted from a protest with noble intentions to a symbolic showdown, where both sides, the protesters and the police, seemed to be pawns on each other's emotional and ideological chessboard. Yet, this transformation did nothing to diminish the drama or the biting humor of the situation. The protesters appeared to become increasingly energized, passionately shouting slogans like "I am Palestinian," "I have the right to live," and "You are defending injustice." Each chant felt like a powerful accusation, but also curiously vague, leaving bystanders and even some participants wondering, what exactly are we protesting? However, it seemed that, for the protesters, the content of their chants was secondary to their volume. As long as the shouts were loud enough, they believed the message, whatever it might be, would leave a profound impact. While some participants remained serious, trying to maintain an air of organization, others seemed to view the protest as the perfect opportunity for artistic expression. They improvised dramatic performances, perhaps hoping that their theatrics would lend more weight to their demands. A few students, whether inspired or simply seeking attention, began running back and forth in front of the police, occasionally raising their hands to the sky or suddenly plopping down onto the ground. The scene resembled a Hollywood movie where, in a climactic moment, the protagonist collapses in the middle of a crowded street to express their frustration with an oppressive society. The difference here, of course, was that there was no director orchestrating the scene, nor were there cameras capturing the iconic moment. Some observers couldn't help but chuckle at the overly enthusiastic antics. One student took the drama up a notch by collapsing onto the ground, arms outstretched, as if embodying the tragic victim of some imagined catastrophe. Not to be outdone, another protester nearby quickly raised the sign with the dramatic slogan, "The police are the symbol of global oppression." Meanwhile, the officers, struggling to keep straight faces, were left wondering, global oppression. And yet here we are, working night shifts on these salaries. Such actions not only left the police feeling awkward but also gave the entire event a tone that was part farce, part street theater. A few professors, still stuck inside the administrative building and watching through the windows, shook their heads and murmured, "Are they fighting for justice or auditioning for a street play?" What stood out was that few of the protesters seemed genuinely concerned with delivering a clear message or offering specific solutions. Everything felt like a spontaneous use what you've got production, so long as it grabbed attention and created the impression that they were changing the world, and if that meant shouting loudly, collapsing, or striking a pose like a movie star, they were more than willing. No one could deny the passion and commitment of the participants. However, many observers couldn't help but question whether such flamboyant actions would lead to any meaningful change or whether they simply provoked exasperation and alienated potential supporters. In the end, the greatest takeaway might have been this: enthusiasm without direction can all too. As tensions reached a boiling point, where it seemed like a full-fledged battle was on the verge of erupting, the police were ultimately forced to take more aggressive measures to move the arrested individuals into the patrol cars. But not everyone was ready to back down so easily. One student, after being ushered into the vehicle, still didn't forget to scream, "I'm not a criminal, I'm a protester for peace." In reality, he wasn't just protesting, he seemed to be trying to turn the situation into a dramatic performance of courage, all while crying out about injustice. The atmosphere became so charged, so tense, that it was easy to imagine an impending war. The flashing red and blue lights mixed with the shouts of both sides, creating a scene that, if viewed from a distance, might make one think this was a film shoot for an action movie rather than a protest at a university. While some protesters quietly accepted their arrests, others stood their ground defiantly. One particular student, with eyes filled with determination and a voice that could be heard for miles, turned his arrest into a theatrical performance. Even as he was pushed into the patrol car, he didn't forget to shout his slogan with all his might, "I'm not a criminal, I'm a protester for peace." His voice echoed so loudly that it seemed the entire campus could hear. In fact, his actions weren't just a simple reaction to being detained. It was as if he was making a personal declaration, seeking to etch his name into the small history of the event. In his mind, it seemed, he believed himself to be the hero in a grand narrative, a fighter against oppressive power, ready to sacrifice everything for his ideals. With every shout, he seemed to be trying to create a moment of peak courage, hoping that everyone, from his friends to the professors and even the social media followers, would remember him as a symbol of resistance. However, the reality was quite different. Rather than inspiring others, his actions caused many witnesses to laugh or shake their heads in exasperation. Some of his fellow protesters tried to stifle their giggles, feeling proud of his enthusiasm, but simultaneously embarrassed by his over-the-top showmanship. One professor, hurrying out of the administrative building, thought to himself, if he put this energy into his studies, he wouldn't have to retake the philosophy exam, and the police, seasoned veterans of such situations, could only sigh. One officer muttered to his colleague, "Does he think he's Che Guevara or something?" Meanwhile, the officer sitting in the back of the patrol car tried to maintain his serious demeanor, but couldn't help but smirk as the student continued his performance, even starting to hum a song no one had asked for. Behind his cries of "I fight for peace" lay a paradoxical humor. The protest, initially organized for a noble cause, was overshadowed by these personal dramatic acts. Instead of becoming a strong collective statement, the event quickly morphed into a small stage for certain individuals to shine. The lesson to take away from this moment is clear. When fighting for a cause, it's not about how loud you shout or how convincing your performance is, but whether you are doing it with humility and understanding. Sadly, for this young student, the only thing he might be remembered for after today is how he turned a serious protest into an impromptu performance that no one asked for. As the protest finally came to a close, the silence wasn't part of the day's script. Instead, its aftermath became a hot topic all over the campus and on social media. The focal point of all the gossip was a story that became more and more exaggerated, a student allegedly brutally beaten by the police and rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Of course, no one knew the true facts. But that didn't matter. The story spread quickly, catching fire like dry grass, and with every retelling, it became more dramatic, more tragic. The remaining protesters seemed to draw new energy from this unverified rumor. Even though it had no basis in reality, it became a new weapon in their hands. A group quickly switched from chanting slogans to filming a spiritual documentary. They began discussing, even debating, what to title the film. Some suggested titles like The Truth Suppressed or NMSU. Fallen Heroes. One person even boldly declared, "We need to make the whole world know the truth." A statement full of enthusiasm, but lacking practicality, as even they weren't sure what the truth actually was. The accusations against the police came swiftly, with a barrage of criticisms as if they were competing for the Best Screenplay award. The police aren't justice, they're tools of oppression. One shouted during the post-protest gathering. The crowd nodded vigorously in agreement, but when asked specifically, who saw the police beat anyone? Everyone suddenly fell silent or deflected with answers like, "I heard it from a friend of a friend." Meanwhile, the demand for evidence became their top priority. "We want to see footage from the police cameras," they declared assertively, almost ordering it. However, this insistence was laced with irony. They wanted videos of events they weren't even aware had been recorded, hoping to find evidence that would support their emotional narrative. Ironically, their demand for transparency from the police was not accompanied by any desire to fact-check the rumors they had spread themselves. Conversations didn't just stay in dorm hallways or nearby coffee shops, they spilled over onto online platforms. Emotional posts flooded Twitter and Instagram, with hashtags like #JusticeForOurStudent or #PoliceBrutality at NMSU, though no one knew whether the justice they demanded was based on anything specific. Some students even seized the opportunity to livestream, expressing outrage and urging friends worldwide to join the cause. "We can't let the truth be covered up anymore," they declared with confidence, as if they were uncovering a grand conspiracy. But the question remained, what was the truth? The police, on the other hand, maintained a professional silence. Despite the criticism, they patiently gathered information and analyzed the situation methodically. One officer, upon hearing the request for camera footage, simply shrugged, "We also want to check what happened. But it seems like they know more than we do." This incident not only highlighted the tense relationship between students and the authorities, but also served as a vivid example of how simple events can be transformed into dramatic, even tragic, stories with a little imagination and exaggeration. In this context, the protest was no longer about Palestine, peace, or justice, but about the very people involved in the protest. In the end, 11 people were arrested, with 8 facing charges for legal violations. 1 was accused of assaulting an officer. These protesters would face trial, but perhaps before going to court, they would deliver long speeches about human rights, genocide, and a few theories of their own. The protest at New Mexico State University ended not with societal change or a profound message of peace, but with a series of controversial events, vague accusations, and fictional footage that was never made. Instead of becoming a symbol for justice and solidarity, it was remembered as a rehearsal for enthusiasm without direction and entertainment-driven exaggeration. The most unfortunate thing was not the accusations against the police or the brief disruption on campus, but the waste of an opportunity, the chance to use their collective voice in a more meaningful way. Protest, at its core, is a powerful tool for promoting change, but when driven by fleeting emotions or personal motives, it can easily lose its weight and respect from the public. From this event, we learn that passion and the desire for change are admirable, but they must be accompanied by responsibility and understanding. A protest only holds value when it is based on truth, thorough preparation, and a clear goal. Furthermore, respect for common rules and professional conduct is crucial in gaining empathy and support from the community. In the end, instead of turning such events into a stage for impulsive emotions, we should view them as opportunities for dialogue, learning, and genuinely understanding the issues we wish to fight for.